He said it with a smile, like it was some joke, like he didn't just threaten to rip apart what's left of my life. "I could blackmail you," he whispered, grinning like he was telling me the weather. And in that second, the world around me muted. People were laughing, eating ribs, sipping drinks in the sun. But for me, everything stopped. My breath caught in my chest, my hands went numb. I remember the condensation dripping from my cup, the faint smell of charcoal and beer. Then, just silence. And Dan's voice echoing in my skull like a bad dream I couldn't wake from. "You have to understand. This wasn't just a stranger coming at me with threats. This was Dan, my sister's so-called husband, the one who'd slithered into our family years ago like a parasite. I knew from the moment I met him something wasn't right. The fake charm, the too eager smile, the way he stared at my kids like he was trying to memorize them. But I kept quiet. Because Sandy loved him. Because every time I raised a concern, she shut me down. Said I was being judgmental. Said I never liked anyone she dated. Maybe she was right. Maybe I just didn't like guys who made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. But that day, that moment at the BBQ, that was the final straw. I left without a word, just picked up my purse, signaled to my friend, and walked out. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the keys into the ignition. And the second I shut the car door, I let out a scream so guttural it scared me. That wasn't just rage. That was everything. Years of bottling things up, of being the bigger person, of swallowing poison and calling it love. Let me back up for a second. I'm 44. I've been married to Jacob for 12 years. And no, our marriage hasn't been perfect. He's cheated twice. And no, we haven't had sex in over a year. Not even a kiss. We run a business together. We're basically co-workers with rings now. But we have 2 boys, 11 and 14. And they're the reason I've kept trying. I get up, I show up, I do the damn thing. I've held this family together with duct tape and desperation. Meanwhile, Sandy has been a never-ending tornado. Back surgeries, pain meds, relapses, depression. Then, the manipulative guilt-tripping when she's sober. I've bathed her when she couldn't stand, fed her when she wouldn't eat, took care of her son like he was my third. I'd be up at 6 a.m. making lunches for my kids and hers. I cleaned her house while she cried in bed. I babysat, cooked, cleaned, loaned money I never got back. And every time I tried to take a step back, she'd say something like, "You're all I have." And I'd cave, because we're twins. Because I remember holding her hand when we were 5, hiding in the closet while our mum threw dishes across the kitchen. Because trauma bonds are thicker than blood. But this past year, it changed everything. It started with something small, stupid even, a text message. Jacob was on the couch watching TV. I was folding laundry. He laughed, said, weird. Dan just sent me a doit pic. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean just?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shrugged. "Probably a mistake. He said he meant to send it to someone else. Made a joke about tacos. I don't know." And he laughed it off, like it was a meme, like it was normal. I didn't laugh. I felt sick, because that wasn't normal. That was a test. Dan was probing, seeing what he could get away with. And Jacob, in his usual passive way, just ignored it, let it slide. And I was left sitting there, staring at my husband's phone like it was radioactive. A week later, Dan accidentally brushed his hand across my hip when I was loading Sandy's dishwasher. Said, "Oops," like a teenager who thought it was cute. I stiffened. He smirked. I wanted to scream. But instead, I smiled politely and moved away, like I always did. I started locking up our medicine cabinet after I caught Sandy in our bathroom, rummaging. She claimed she was looking for toothpaste. But I know the look of a desperate addict. We'd been through this cycle too many times. Once, after her second back surgery, I found half my anxiety pills gone. No apology, just silence and then tears. I covered for her with her kid's school, told the principal she was having health issues when she forgot to pick him up. I even drove across town to get her groceries when she said she couldn't move. And she'd always say, "Thank God for you. I'd be dead without you." Maybe that was the problem. Maybe she should have learned to survive without me. The thing is, Dan never left. Even when they separated, even after he came out as gay, he just kept living there like nothing changed. And Sandy let it happen. She defended it, said it was too hard to find new places, said she didn't want to uproot their son. But I knew better. She was scared to be alone. She clung to toxic people like a life raft, even when they were dragging her down. And I was done being dragged down too. So I set a boundary. I said Dan wasn't welcome around my kids. Not after the photo. Not after the weird touches. Not after everything. And Sandy flipped, called me a hypocrite, said I had no right to judge not with my cheating husband. That one stung. She knew how hard I fought to hold on to this fragile thing called family, and she threw it in my face like it meant nothing. Still, I held my ground. And that brings us back to the BBQ, the moment where everything snapped. After I left, I called Jacob, told him what Dan said. He went silent, then said, "I'll handle it," and hung up. He didn't scream, didn't yell, just got in the car and drove straight to Sandy's place. Didn't even tell me until after. When he got there, Dan opened the door like it was Christmas morning. All's smiles. Tried to hand over a dusty old box he claimed was stuff your boys left behind over the years. Inside, a sock, a plastic toy, some drawings, and a damn piece of a training potty seat. Who saves that? What kind of man saves toilet training parts that aren't even from his own kids? Jacob told me later he felt like his skin was crawling just standing in the entryway. Dan kept smiling. Like he hadn't just threatened me. Like he was the victim somehow. Jacob said he didn't even raise his voice. Just told Dan, "This ends now." That if he ever came near me or our kids again, he wouldn't get a warning next time. Sandy called later that night. Crying, begging, said Dan was just joking, that I was overreacting, said I shouldn't throw away family over one little misunderstanding. But this wasn't one thing. It was everything. It was years of manipulation, boundary crossing, fake apologies and crocodile tears. And I finally saw it all for what it was. So I told her, "As long as Dan is in your life, I want no part of it." She screamed, cried, called me selfish, dramatic, said I was abandoning her, but I didn't care. I couldn't care anymore. For once, I chose me. I told Jacob I wanted to go public. I didn't want to live in fear of what Dan might say. He nodded, said, "Then let's do it." So we made a post, not the whole story, but enough. Enough to take the power back, enough to tell the truth without tearing down everything. We said there had been inappropriate behaviour, that boundaries had been crossed, that we were stepping away from certain family ties to protect our kids. The fallout? Immediate. Some family took my side. Quietly. Messages like, "I've always thought something was off with him," or "Proud of you for speaking up." Others, especially those close to Sandy, turned on me, called me a liar, said I was making drama, said I was being cruel to my own sister. But I didn't respond. I let the silence speak for itself. I thought that would be the end of it. But I was wrong. I wish I could say it ended there. That the Facebook post was the final nail in the coffin. That I finally found peace. But when someone like Dan loses control, they don't just walk away. They claw, they twist, they dig into every crevice of your life until there's no air left. And Sandy, she wasn't ready to let go either. Not of me. Not of the story. Not of the illusion we had a normal, unbreakable twin bond that could survive anything. The day after the post went up, my phone started buzzing non-stop. Unknown numbers. Voicemails that were just heavy breathing or static. Then a text from a number I didn't recognize. No name, no greeting, just, "You think you've won?" It's about... That smiley face made my skin crawl. It was Dan. I knew it in my bones. Jacob wanted to go to the police, but I told him not yet. I didn't want this to escalate. I wanted it to die. But Dan wasn't going to let it. The next day, one of Jacob's co-workers pulled him aside at the office, said, "Hey, just a heads up. Someone's been emailing around some... stuff." Attached were screenshots of an old argument between Jacob and I from 3 years ago. One where I'd threatened to leave him after his second affair. One where I admitted in writing that I sometimes fantasized about being with someone else too. It was raw, personal, something I never wanted out there. And now it was floating around like office gossip. We changed our passwords, shut down our social media, but the damage was done. People started treating us differently. The whispers came, the pitying looks, the subtle judgment in PTA meetings, like we were some scandal unraveling in slow motion. And Sandy? She finally broke her silence with a Facebook post of her own. A photo of us as kids, maybe 6 years old, dressed in matching birthday dresses, smiling like we didn't know how the world would chew us up later. The caption read, "Some sisters forget who held their hand when Mum locked them outside in the rain." That was a knife, not because it was a lie, but because it was true. She had held my hand that night. I still remember our soaked socks, the thunder, how we clung to each other until the screaming inside stopped. That memory had kept me tethered to her for years. And now she was weaponizing it, turning trauma into guilt, love into leverage. I didn't respond, but inside I was unraveling. And it wasn't just emotional, it got physical. I started losing sleep, couldn't eat. My hands would tremble when I held a coffee cup. My youngest noticed first. One morning, he wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "Mum, are you okay? You look like the ghost lady from that show." And I laughed, a short, broken laugh. Because he was right. I was disappearing. So I went back to therapy. Sat in that same office I'd sat in years before when I first caught Jacob cheating. Only this time, I wasn't crying over a man. I was crying over myself, over how I'd become a bystander in my own life, how I let everyone's chaos bury me. And that's when I finally said the words out loud. "I think Dan wants to destroy me." My therapist didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, "Then why are you still giving him the power?" It hit me like a slap, because even after the post, the boundaries, the confrontation, I was still afraid, still looking over my shoulder, still replaying every interaction, wondering what else he had on me. And more than that, I was still hoping Sandy would come to her senses, still leaving the door cracked open just in case. But that door had to shut, all the way, so I blocked her number, blocked Dan's, set up filters on my email, told the school to call Jacob for anything from now on. I even asked a close friend to keep an eye out at our kids' soccer games, just in case Dan showed up pretending to be supportive Uncle Dan again, because he had done that before. Stood on the sidelines like he belonged, clapping a little too loud, always watching. Things got quiet for a while after that. a strange, uneasy quiet, like the air before a storm. 3 weeks passed. Then, one afternoon, I was digging through the pantry when I found an old baby monitor in the back. It was covered in dust, battery long dead. I laughed softly to myself, remembering how we used to use it to spy on the boys when they were toddlers. I nearly tossed it, but something told me to keep it, to check it, so I charged it, and to my horror, it powered on and immediately connected to something. Static, then breathing. I froze. I walked around the house with the receiver in hand. The breathing got louder in the hallway, then the laundry room. I opened the door, trembling. Nothing. Just piles of clothes, a half-used bottle of detergent, the smell of fabric softener. I looked up. There, tucked high behind the shelf, almost hidden, was a small black device. A baby monitor camera. Not ours. I dropped the receiver and backed away like I'd touched fire. Called Jacob. Called the cops. The camera was turned over to the police, but I already knew. It was Dan. He'd been inside our house. Recently. Watching. I threw up in the sink. My legs gave out. Jacob caught me as I slid to the floor. I'd never felt so violated, so small, so utterly helpless. Because it wasn't just a threat anymore. It was real. This man had been recording us, watching us, and I had no idea for how long. The cops opened a report, but said there wasn't enough to press charges unless we caught him in the act. No fingerprints, no clear footage of him placing it. Just an anonymous, silent eye hidden in our own home. They told us to upgrade our locks, install our own cameras, maybe even file for a restraining order. But what would that do? Dan was too clever. He operated in grey areas. Always just enough deniability to get away with it. Sandy called the next day. Left a voicemail. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. He told me you were exaggerating, that you made everything up. But now I see. I'm scared too. For the first time, her voice cracked like it hadn't before, like she wasn't performing. But I didn't call her back, because it was too late. That night, Jacob and I sat in silence at the dining table. The boys were asleep. The house felt like it wasn't ours anymore. And he said, "Do you think he'll stop now?" I didn't answer, because deep down I knew the truth. People like Dan don't stop. They just wait. And I was right. Exactly 1 year later, to the day of the BBQ, I got a letter. No return address, handwritten in red ink. Inside, one photo. Me, at a gas station, arguing with Jacob. You could tell we were in the middle of a fight. His face twisted in frustration. Mine, red with tears. And underneath the photo, scribbled in messy print, "You looked better broken." I stared at it for a long time. Let the fear wash over me. Let the rage simmer under my skin. Then I took a deep breath and lit the damn thing on fire. I wasn't the same woman I'd been a year ago. Not the one who cowered. Not the one who cleaned up after everyone's mess. Dan could keep playing games. But I wasn't in them anymore. I was building something different now. Something he'd never be part of again. I wish I could tell you that burning that photo set me free. It didn't. It gave me a brief high, a flash of control. But when the ashes settled and the smoke cleared, the weight was still there. Not fear, exactly. More like something worse. Anticipation. The feeling you get when you know someone's watching, even if you can't see them. That's the thing about people like Dan. They don't need to be in the room to be present. They live in the corners of your mind, in the shadows of your peace, always waiting to make you second-guess yourself. But Dan didn't just appear out of nowhere. No, monsters like him are shaped. And the truth is, I saw it happening in real time. I just didn't want to admit it. I met Dan 15 years ago, the day Sandy brought him to our mum's 60th birthday. She was glowing, practically bouncing on her heels, dragging him around like some grand prize she'd won, and he played the part, charmed everyone, called our mum Ma'am, and kissed her hand like we were in a movie. Even Jacob liked him, said he was different from the guys Sandy usually brought around. I remember the exact moment I felt it, that twist in my gut. We were standing near the cake, and Dan leaned in to grab a napkin from the table beside me. He didn't need to lean in the way he did. Didn't need to brush against my arm and whisper, "You and Sandy don't look anything alike. You've got that quiet fire. She's loud, but you burn." I froze. I laughed it off. Uncomfortable. Shoved it deep into the file cabinet of things I didn't want to deal with. Told myself he was just weird. But it kept happening. Subtle things. A hand on the small of my back that lingered too long. Texts at odd hours with accidental compliments. Once, after a family dinner, he said, "If I'd met you first," and then trailed off like it was nothing. And Sandy, she was too blinded by the fact that someone actually stayed. She and I didn't grow up believing people stayed. Our mother was hot and cold. Our father left before we could form full sentences. The only constant we had was each other. That's why it took me so long to cut her off. She wasn't just my sister. She was the other half of every memory I had. Every scraped knee, every slammed door, every late-night whisper about how we'd run away someday. But when you carry someone that long, eventually your arms give out. I remember the worst of it. 2 years ago, Sandy had just had her 3rd back surgery. She was high as hell on painkillers, but insisted she didn't need help. I found her passed out on the bathroom floor with her son screaming in the living room. She had vomit in her hair, and Dan, nowhere to be found. I bathed her, put her in bed, fed her son, and got him to sleep on my couch. And when I opened my medicine cabinet the next morning, my antidepressants were gone. All of them. I confronted her, and she cried, said she was in pain, said I didn't understand, said I was lucky to have my life together. Lucky. As if I hadn't clawed my way through years of therapy, cheating, bankruptcy, and postpartum depression just to stand upright. Still, I let it go, because that's what I always did, until Dan pushed too far. After the baby monitor incident, Jacob and I got serious. We moved houses, quietly, no social media updates, no housewarming, just packed up our lives and left like ghosts. We didn't tell Sandy. We didn't tell anyone except my therapist and one trusted friend. Changed schools, changed locks, changed everything. We needed to disappear for a while, start fresh. And for a moment, it actually worked. I remember the first time I exhaled without tension. We were on the porch of our new place, Jacob drinking tea, me reading a book. The boys were laughing inside. I turned to him and said, "Do you hear that?" He listened. "It's nothing," I whispered. "That's what peace sounds like." But peace is fragile when you've lived in chaos long enough. It starts to feel unnatural, like you don't deserve it. And I began catching myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, jumping at shadows, reading into every unknown number. Even a knock at the door made my chest tighten. That's what trauma does. It rewires you. Then, last fall, we got a visit from CPS. A report had been made anonymously, alleging neglect, that our kids were often left alone, not fed, and exposed to unsafe individuals. The woman who came to our door was kind. She even apologized for the inconvenience, said it all looked fine, but I saw the doubt in her eyes as she jotted things down in her notepad. And I knew who had sent her. Sandy. Not Dan this time. Sandy. Because Dan had been cut out. But Sandy? She was still circling the perimeter, still clinging to the idea that this was just a phase, that I'd come back, that we'd laugh about all this someday. She sent me one last message, a photo. Us, age 7, building a pillow fort in Grandma's living room, faces smeared with peanut butter, pure joy. The caption said, "You can't just erase me." I didn't reply, but the message haunted me. Because she was right, I couldn't erase her. She was a part of me, my twin, my mirror, my history, but I could choose what part of that history I carried forward. And I was choosing silence, distance, safety. I thought that would be enough. Until the night I found my youngest crying in the hallway, clutching his tablet. I asked him what was wrong. He said, "Why is Uncle Dan saying you're going to jail?" I snatched the tablet from him and saw it, a fake Instagram account pretending to be a truth teller, tagging my name, sharing edited photos and bizarre captions. Behind every perfect family photo is a liar and a thief. She stole her sister's life and now she's playing victim. Soon, the world will know. My blood ran cold. Jacob deleted the app, blocked the account. We sat the boys down, explained that some people are sick and sometimes those people used to be family. But how do you explain this? How do you protect your kids from something so unseeable, so insidious? How do you shield them from shadows that used to wear familiar faces? That night, as they slept, I opened the closet where I kept the box of old things, photos, letters, keepsakes from a time before things went bad. I took out one photo. Sandy and I at 19. Beach trip. Hair tangled from the wind, laughing so hard I could practically hear it. We looked so free, so whole. I stared at it for a long time, then ripped it in half. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I was done mourning people who refused to heal. Dan wanted to destroy me. Sandy wanted me to feel guilty for surviving. And somewhere along the way, I forgot I didn't owe either of them my silence, my suffering, or my story. So I started writing. Not for revenge, not for pity, but for clarity. Because sometimes the only way to end the cycle is to name it. To speak the truth so loudly, it drowns out every whisper behind your back. And maybe, just maybe, to help someone else who's living in the same nightmare with different names. It's strange how silence can be louder than a scream. For the first time in my life, I wasn't answering calls. I wasn't rushing to fix, to explain, to defend. I was quiet. And in that quiet, something shifted. I could hear myself again. I started keeping a journal, not just notes, but everything. The things I remembered, the things I tried to forget. I wrote about the day I first saw Sandy collapse after taking too many pills, and how I cleaned up the mess without telling a soul. I wrote about Dan's gaze, how it never settled on a single thing, like he was always scanning for something to control. I wrote about my marriage, about Jacob's failures, but also his loyalty in the darkest moments. About how he stood in the doorway when I couldn't speak, when I felt like disappearing. About how we found each other again, not in romance, but in survival. I wasn't writing to heal. I was writing to remember, because that's what predators count on. You forgetting, forgiving, minimizing, but not anymore. About a month ago, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived in the mail. Not from Dan, not from Sandy. It was from Dan's sister. It was handwritten, pages long, and what it contained sent chills down my spine. She apologized for staying silent for so long, said she'd always suspected things about Dan, even as a teenager. How he lied, manipulated, always played the victim when caught. How their family enabled him, coddled him, brushed off every red flag. But what caught my breath was this. I saw your post last year, and I knew. I've been reading everything he's been doing to you since. He doesn't just want to hurt you. He wants to erase you. Because you're the one who saw him clearly. She enclosed printouts, screenshots of group chats, emails Dan had sent under fake names, photoshopped images, messages he drafted and deleted, pages from forums where he spread rumours, hinted at anonymous tips to child protection agencies, attempted to recruit others into his narrative. It was organised, strategic, like a campaign. And yet, it reeked of desperation. The mask had started to slip. I handed it all to the authorities. Again, this time with names, with backup, with a statement. It's still an open case, still pending. But the difference now? I'm not hiding, because Dan thrives on shame, on secrets, on silence, and I've stripped him of all three. As for Sandy, she hasn't contacted me since. Not after that last message. Not after I blocked her son's number too when he tried to guilt me with, "Just talk to her, she's not doing well." I didn't respond. Not because I don't care, but because I care too much. And I know where that road leads. Caring without boundaries is how I lost myself in the first place. People love the story of the strong woman who forgives, who returns, who rebuilds broken bridges. But sometimes, the real strength is in burning those bridges down and walking away with the match still warm in your hand. You want the truth? I miss her. Some days, unbearably so. I miss the sister who used to sing to me when I had nightmares. I miss the inside jokes, the language only twins understand. I miss the girl who once promised we'd never leave each other behind. But that girl is gone. She died the day she chose to protect Dan over her own blood. And I finally stopped trying to resurrect her. What I've learned through all of this, through betrayal, violation, heartbreak, is that sometimes the villain isn't a stranger lurking in the dark. Sometimes it's the person sitting beside you at dinner, the one who knows your soft spots, the one who studies your insecurities like blueprints. And when they decide to strike, it's not loud or obvious, it's surgical, precise. Dan didn't try to destroy me with violence. He tried to do it with shame, but I don't carry that anymore. I carry truth. And if that truth makes people uncomfortable, good. Let them squirm, because I'm done being polite to poison. This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's a story about rebirth. The old me, she was a fixer, a rescuer, a woman who thought being needed was the same as being loved. The new me, she's watching, she's remembering, and she's done apologising for surviving. And yet, just as I started to breathe again, another envelope came. No return address, just one word typed on a blank sheet. Soon. I stared at it for a while, didn't panic, didn't cry. I put it back in the envelope, sealed it shut, and filed it with the rest of the evidence. Because here's the thing. The more he tries to scare me, the more he proves who he is. And when the time comes, he won't be hiding behind shadows anymore. He'll be standing in the light. And everyone will see him clearly. I'm not telling this story because it's over. I'm telling it because it's not. Because someone else out there is where I was. Scared, silenced, wondering if they're crazy for seeing the truth no one else will name. You're not crazy, and you're not alone. Keep your eyes open, keep your voice loud, and don't ever let anyone tell you your story doesn't matter. It does. And this is just the beginning.
That was satisfying, wasn't it? If this story moved you in any way, if it reminded you of someone, or made you think about your own small moments, feel free to tell me about it in the comments section. And also don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories like this.